the Christmas star. We started seeing articles about, oh, this is the first time in 800 years the Star of Bethlehem and is coming in the sky. And I thought, well, I want to hear about this from a biblical Christian perspective, from somebody that I trust. So that's why I wanted to bring you in.
If you look at the biblical text, what happens with the star that led the Magi to Christ is very different from a conjunction. Basically, if you read the description of the star that led the Magi, it does things that no natural object can do. And now God normally uses natural phenomenon to accomplish his goals. That's fine. He can do that. So I'm not anti God using natural forces. But in this case, we need to recognize God is not limited to natural forces. And everything about the Bethlehem star indicates that it was a supernatural manifestation of God's power.
All right. Well, I'm here today with Dr. Jason Lisle, who is an astrophysicist and the founder of the Biblical Science Institute. And it's a pleasure to have you today, Jason.
Thanks. Good to be on.
So we're speaking primarily right now to the moms of masterbooks. It's our homeschool group. Most of them would be aware of you through the course that we provide at Masterbooks, the Introduction to Logic course, which is one of our best-selling courses, and also the Astronomy course, which is loaded with your books. I think Taking Back Astronomy is in that book. There might be the DVD from the planetarium, which we're involved with, is in that. But this is obviously one of our family favorites. We've worn it out pretty well. But this is one that I'll post a link to as well in the comments, so that anybody who's interested in this after today's discussion can find out more. But one of the reasons that I wanted to invite you in is because you are an astrophysicist, correct? So what is an astrophysicist?
Well, you know how scientists, they'll study different aspects of, biology or geology. All of that takes place on Earth. The astrophysicist studies everything else. So we hit the rest of the universe, basically.
Okay.
It's the study of the universe, the study of outer space, stars, galaxies, things like that.
Gotcha. So why did you choose that, actually? What made you want to be an astrophysicist?
It was just fascinating. I've always been interested in outer space, and I remember seeing these wonderful images of these planets and just hanging out there in space, suspended on nothing, and the way things orbit. It's just amazing. It's so different from our everyday experience. It's very beautiful, and the sizes of these things. There's just something captivating about that. You look at Jupiter, and I look at it in my telescope, and it looks like it's that big. It's actually over 10 Earths in diameter. It's enormous. And so to take a look at these other worlds and it excites the imagination, I think, is what it is for me. And it glorifies God.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, from my family's perspective, we certainly have gained a lot from your fascination. You've equipped us and given us a lot of faith over the years. I think I counted it. Was it 8 books? We have 8 books, master books, at least 8 books. And then you've been a contributor in a countless number of other projects and DVDs. So yeah, we certainly appreciate the ministry that you do.
Thank you. Good.
So then the Christmas star. We started seeing articles about, oh, this is the first time in 800 years the Star of Bethlehem and is coming in the sky. And I thought, well, I want to hear about this from a biblical Christian perspective, from somebody that I trust. So that's why I wanted to bring you in and just, what sense do we make of this?
Okay, well, there is an unusual event that's going to happen on December 21st, and it's what we call a conjunction. And a conjunction is where one object passes by another, very close in terms of our perspective in the sky. And in this case, Jupiter is going to pass by Saturn. And they'll come so close that in a small telescope, you'll be able to see the details of both planets in the same field of view. And so I'm hoping to get a picture of this because last time this happened, it happens every 20 years with Jupiter and Saturn. But the last time this happened, I didn't have a nice telescope and the ability to photograph this kind of stuff. So I'm looking forward to it. I hope I get to see it. Now, that being said, it's not the Christmas star.
Okay.
It happens to occur on December 21st, which is the winter solstice. It's not happening on Christmas anyway. We don't know exactly what time of the year even Jesus was born. There's some argument to be made that it was around this time, but we don't really know. But if you look at the biblical text, what happens with the star that led the Magi to Christ is very different from a conjunction. Now, some people have argued that it's a conjunction of Jupiter and Venus. There was a really nice conjunction of Jupiter and Venus that happened in the year 2 BC, but we think that's a little bit too late. We think Christ was probably born around 4 BC, maybe 5 BC, somewhere around there. So that one's a little bit too late. Okay. And so it basically, if you read the description of the star that led the Magi, it does things that no natural object can do. It seems to have risen in the west. If you read it, if you read the text and the way they're looking at it, it seems to have risen in the west over Israel, and that would be in confirmation of the prophecy in I think it's Numbers 24:17, Balaam's prophecy, where a star shall rise from Jacob, a scepter shall come forth from Israel. And the Magi living in the east, living in perhaps the Persia area, somewhere around where Babylon was, in that kind of area, they were looking west and they're seeing a star rise over Israel. And they recognize that no natural star would do that because all natural stars rise in the east. And so if you see a star rise over Jerusalem, Bethlehem, that kind of area, from the perspective of Persia, it would be rising in the west. No natural object can do that. But more importantly, the star seems to have guided the Magi. It says it went ahead of them, indicating that it moved, it led them, and then it stood over where the child was. And so it moved and then it stopped. And no natural object does that. I mean, there's the North Star, but that would only lead you to the North Pole. And there wasn't a North Star at that time anyway because of the change of Earth's axis. So my point is the Bethlehem star did things that no natural object that we know of can do. And now God normally uses natural phenomenon to accomplish his goals. That's fine. He can do that. So I'm not anti God using natural forces. But in this case, we need to recognize God is not limited to natural forces. And everything about the Bethlehem star indicates that it was a supernatural manifestation of God's power that rose over where the child was, apparently led the Magi to him, wasn't visible to everyone. Herod didn't know about it. He had to ask the wise men when they saw it. It wasn't always visible because apparently when the Magi arrived at Jerusalem, the star apparently wasn't guiding them because they went and asked. They had to ask around, where is he who's been born king of the Jews? And then after meeting with Herod, the star appeared to them again and led them over apparently to the house. There's a lot of things the Christmas cards get wrong, but I think that one's actually right. I think the star hovering over the house where Christ was, and he was in the house at the time. They didn't arrive at the nativity scene. This is perhaps a year, maybe a little more than a year later, that the wise men arrive. And I can demonstrate that textually, that it was well after the nativity scene. So the wise men were not at the nativity scene, despite what you see. That's where the Christmas cards get it wrong. But the star hovering over the house, that seems to be right because they already knew he was in Bethlehem. Herod told them that. So they knew to search Bethlehem and the surrounding towns. Apparently the star led them to the exact location. Now, so the event that's happening on December 21st is nothing like that. That being said, it's cool, and I hope people will enjoy taking a look at this rare conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn. Jupiter takes 12 years to orbit the sun once. Saturn takes 29. And so if you think about it, that means every now and then Jupiter will lap Saturn, and that happens every 20 years. So the last time this happened was the year 2000 and 1980 before that. And so I've experienced 2 of these, but I didn't have good equipment last time. This will be my first chance to photograph it. And this is a really good one. This is a really good conjunction because Jupiter will come. A lot of times when Jupiter passes Saturn, it's way below it or way above it. In this case, it's just a little bit below it. And so it's a very close conjunction. Wow. And it's the best, it's the closest conjunction in at least 400 years, and probably the closest that anybody's seen in 800 years, because the one 400 years ago, the sun was in the way. So this is a really good event. And now if you miss it, you get another chance in 20 years. So 2040, you get another shot. It won't be as good. If you want an even better one, in the year 2080, hey, some people watching this might make it to 2080. I don't expect to, but some people, hey, some youngsters watching this, you might get to see the one in 2080. It'll be even better. Jupiter will be even closer to Saturn on that one. So these things are just neat. It's neat to see the clockwork operation of the universe. And And plus, another bonus too, for people that are just getting into astronomy, maybe you just got a small telescope, maybe somebody's getting a telescope for Christmas, and this is a great way to find Saturn. Jupiter's easy. Jupiter is incredibly bright. You'll see it in the southwest. Saturn can be a little hard to find if you don't know what you're looking for, especially if you don't know the constellations, because Saturn's not real bright. It's kind of an average brightness star, and so people have difficulty finding that. But you won't have any problem on December 21st, because if you can find Jupiter, you can find Saturn. It'll be right next to it, and so it should be very, very pretty. The way to look at the event is to go out in the evening of December 21st, pray for clear skies. Go out about a half an hour after sunset to an hour after sunset. If you wait too much later than that, it'll set, because Jupiter and Saturn will be low in the southwest. So make sure you have a good view of the southwest. If there's a hill there, try to get to a different location where you have a good low horizon on your southwest. You can't miss Jupiter. It'll be the brightest thing in the sky after the sunset. So it'll be gorgeous. And then you'll see this other fainter star right next to it. That's Saturn. You can see it naked eye. You can see it in binoculars. Binoculars might be able to see a few of Jupiter's moons. And in a telescope, you should get a spectacular view of Jupiter and at least 3 of the moons. One of them will be behind Jupiter, depending on where you're at in the world, and therefore what time you see it. And then you'll see Saturn off and some of Saturn's moons. So it'll be a beautiful event.
Wow. Now, you mentioned microscope, and we have that question a lot in regards to your book. What do you recommend a family who would be interested in buying their child a microscope? What would you recommend for them? Is a starter microscope, or maybe even a
telescope?
I'm sorry,
I know nothing about microscopes.
Thank you.
Bigger is better. Bigger is better. I think that's true. That's not true of everything, but it's true of telescopes. And by bigger, I mean wider. Okay. The wider the mirror, and I would recommend. Some people won't like me for saying this. I would recommend a reflecting telescope. You can get telescopes that are pure refractors that have no mirrors in them. They have a lens here and they have a lens here. And that's the simplest kind of telescope. That's a refractor. You get those kind at Walmart. I don't recommend those. High quality refractors are amazing, but you can't afford them. Okay, unless you're a millionaire, you can't, or close to it. High quality refractors are very expensive. And so what you want to get is the cheaper reflector. And so they'll have a mirror in one end. But of course, a mirror reflects light back the way it came in. So you got to deal with that problem somehow. And there are a couple different solutions. Well, actually, many different solutions to that. 2 are common. One is a Newtonian telescope. And that's the one that I would recommend if somebody says, I'm on a budget. I want the cheapest telescope I can possibly get, but I want to be able to actually see something. Okay. I'd recommend a Newtonian telescope. They tend to be kind of long, shorter than a refractor, but long. And they'll have a mirror in the base. And make sure the mirror is at least 6 inches in diameter. Okay. That's the size where you
really wide, right? They're the
right, 6 inches wide, 6 inches in diameter, and the telescopes. That's how they're labeled, is by the diameter of the primary mirror. So that'll be the main feature for it. So you say this is a 6 inch, this is an 8 inch. That's referring to the diameter of the mirror. With a 6 inch telescope, you can see things like the belts on Jupiter. You see Jupiter's moons, no problem. You can see the rings on Saturn with a telescope like that. I learned on a 6 inch telescope, so I know exactly what you can see with it and what you can't see with it. There's some things that are beyond its range. Now, if you want to go a little bigger, 8 inch is even better. 8 inch, you can start seeing individual stars and globular clusters. They look gorgeous in an 8 inch. 10 inch, even better. Bigger means you get brighter images and sharper images. People think, well, I can magnify more. Any telescope can magnify any amount by switching out the eyepiece, but there's a trade-off. The more you zoom in, the blurrier things get. And so I tend to use low magnification, where I get nice sharp images, but you want a big mirror. And
so you don't really need like the real long ones. It's more the width and
it's the width. Yeah. It's the width that's important, not the length. Now, the disadvantage of the Newtonian is it's kind of long. And that's what it does is it has a mirror at a 45-degree angle. So the light comes in, bounces off the mirror. The mirror's curved, and so it concentrates that light, hits a smaller secondary mirror at a 45-degree angle, and comes out to the side. And so that's how you recognize a Newtonian telescope. You're looking in the side of it, which people don't expect if they're not used to telescopes. The other type is called a Schmidt-Cassegrain or a Maxitov-Cassegrain, but I recommend a Schmidt-Cassegrain. Now, they're nice. They're portable. They're much shorter because the mirror reflects the light back through a hole in the primary mirror, and then you can look in it like kind of people expect. And so the ones that look kind of fat and short, that's a Schmidt-Cassegrain. They're also great. They tend to be a little more expensive than the Newtonian, but they're more portable. So there's always these trade-offs. And then you got to decide if you want to get computer controls. If you want to be able to, you can get telescopes where you can push buttons and it'll go to where you tell it to go after you calibrate it. You have to know how to find a couple bright stars, point the telescope at them, and then it knows where it's at. Then you can punch in coordinates, but that's going to cost a little more money. So it's a trade-off as to how much you want to spend. But if you just want to go with a baseline telescope, a few $100, you can get a decent Newtonian telescope, 6-inch or larger. And with the cheapest mount is a Dobsonian mount, nice and cheap. They don't track, most of them, because so you got to remember you're on a rotating planet, and so if you don't have a telescope that tracks, whatever you're looking at will slowly drift across the field of view, and it's a little inconvenient. It's nice to have a telescope that'll track with that object, but then it costs a little more. So there's trade-offs, and I do have a chapter in that book, Stargazer's Guide to the Night Sky, on what are the pros and cons of getting different types of telescopes. So it kind of helps people to evaluate. There's no magic telescope this is just the best one for everybody. It depends on what you're looking for, what you want. But at least I'd go at least 6 inches.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. I've read the chapter. It's just sometimes if you're not familiar with all the terms and technology, just making sense. And then you go to Amazon and you look and it's like, you get lost.
The website too. There's a website, telescopes.com, and that's the Orion telescope website. I don't get any royalties from them. I just find that that's a good brand. I like Orion. The telescope that I use mainly is an Orion telescope. It works very well.
Was you talking about telescopes? Didn't I have a video recently or a couple of years back, it may have been a few years back, of you with Phil from Duck Commander? Did you take the guys out? Yeah. Phil Robertson. I went out to his place, and he invited me over, and got to go out into his backyard. Of course, it's just pitch black there. He owns a lot of property, and it was so much fun. And he enjoyed it, I think. And he said, "This is the first time I've been with an astrophysicist," and he thought that was pretty fun. And I thought it was fun too. He's a neat guy. That is fun. Wow. Well, so let me ask you. Because you enjoy the study now, how much significance with timing of things? Some would consider December 21st, this is the first day of solstice, and all these different things to be significant. As we look into the sky, and we have blood moons and all these different significant events. What weight? Like how do you interpret that?
I don't think there's any prophetic symbolism or anything to any of these things, and we get a lot of that with, well, there's a blood moon. First of all, you really shouldn't call it that. It's called a lunar eclipse, and that's when the moon passes. Well, the moon's orbiting the Earth, and every now and then it orbits such that it goes right into Earth's shadow. So the Earth is exactly between the sun and the moon, and that's cool. I've seen a number of lunar eclipses. I saw one even at sunset. So the sun was setting and the moon was rising in eclipse, and that was cool because I'm casting my shadow on the moon, which was kind of neat. But you can see that the shadow is round, and that demonstrates the Earth is round. Those are cool, and sometimes the moon will turn a little bit of a reddish or an orange color to it, and that's because of the light getting refracted around the Earth's atmosphere, and the blue gets scattered away. Same reason sunsets look orange. The moon will look orange. It never looks blood red, though, never. And so people saying, is this the blood moon of Revelation? No, that's something else. Of course, Revelation is very symbolic anyway. So, but no, there's nothing in prophecy regarding these things that we see. The one that the Bible did prophesy, I think would be the Bethlehem star, because I think that's prophesied in, if I'm not mistaken, Numbers 24:17, where Balaam's prophecy. But that's pretty specific, a star rising over Israel, and that's what happened. So these other events that we see, lunar eclipses, now they're enjoyable. They demonstrate that God controls the universe in a clock-like fashion. The fact that we can predict these things to the second is awesome. And it's not because we're so clever. It's because God has organized the universe in a way that obeys math. And we've been able to discover math. And so we can calculate when these things happen. Solar eclipses, I got to see the solar eclipse back in 2017. It was so much fun. And they were able to predict to the second when the moon would exactly cover the sun. And it's just fun. It's fun to see that. Meteor showers are another thing that I like to look at. And we had one just yesterday, actually, the Geminids. But I missed that one because it was kind of cloudy here, and it's cold out this time of year. So there's that too. But and these other things are important in terms of seed time and harvest, right? I mean, in an agricultural society, it's really important to know, when spring begins and the winter solstice. That's the day where you have the shortest number of daylight hours of the year, and so after that, you start getting more and more daylight hours again. And it's important to know when to plant and when to harvest. So if you're into agriculture, it's crucially important, and that's one of the reasons God made these lights in the sky, to be for signs, seasons, days, and years, to help us keep track of time so we know when to plant and harvest. We've kind of gotten away from that in our culture, and we have calendars, and your computer can tell you what day it is and what time it is exactly. But in the ancient world, they depended on the stars to know when to plant and harvest, things like that.
Okay, that's awesome. Thank you. I was going to ask, I have an app where you can point it, kind of, you can move it around, and it'll just kind of tell you where the stars are and some information. Plays space music, Are those good as well? Do you? Yeah,
I've got a few of those, and one that I use more than any of the others is called Star Walk, and it's just neat. It doesn't do everything I want it to do, but it does a lot of what I'd like it to do, and it's convenient, and it's pretty neat. You just hold it up, and you move it around and tell you where, what stuff is there. You can zoom in, you can zoom out, you can speed up time and see what will happen in the future or what happened in the past. And so, those are neat apps. And in fact, Star Walk even tracks satellites. So if you see a satellite passing over, it used to be you had no idea. You knew it was a satellite because you could see by its speed, and it's not blinking like an airplane. And satellites have a certain speed. Once you learn to spot them, you can say that's a satellite, but you have no idea which one it is. The Star Walk, you can point it up, and it'll identify which satellite it is, what company, everything. So it's really amazing. So I love stuff like that, and most of that stuff you can get either for free or really cheap. Star Walk, I think it's a few bucks or something like that. But wonderful.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I've seen you. I think you're one of the better debaters. I've watched you do some debates. I think you debated Hugh Ross. Is that right? You and Ken. Yeah, and I thought your style of debate is incredible. What got you into apologetics ministry? Like study of stars, but then how did you get into actually starting to do what you do?
Well, even when I was very young, as a young student, I just enjoyed science. I'm astrophysicist, but I like all sciences. Some scientists really specialize in their field. They don't care about anything else. I'm not one of those. I think biology is fascinating, geology is fascinating, and so it was inevitable that at some point, in a biology class, because I was public schooled, and I'm not advocating that, but that's just the way it was. And so in that school system, we were taught evolution, and it was in the biology books as if it was a scientific fact, along with these other things that are genuinely scientific facts, like cell walls and cell membranes and so on. But and so that was a challenge to me, because I knew scripturally that wasn't right, and so that got me thinking through. No, wait a minute. I need to be able to discern truth from error. I need to be able to discern genuine science from that which is called science, but it was really just a story that somebody put into a science textbook. And so it sounds sciencey, but it really isn't. So studying creation versus evolution was a natural outflow of my having a passion for science. Okay. And then when I began to study creation versus evolution, you have to know something about apologetics, because you're getting into that. You're getting these challenges to the Christian faith, in particular the history that's recorded in the book of Genesis that's being challenged by critics. And so you have to learn to defend the faith. And then I found that I really enjoyed that. I found that it was, first of all, it's fun when a critic comes up to you and they think you have no answer, and you just give them this answer. And especially if there's someone that the Holy Spirit's working on them, and you can see the light bulb go on, and they go like, wow, Christianity is actually rational. There's science that confirms these things. And when they come to Christ, that's just wonderful. I mean, God's the one that saves them. But if you can be part of that process that brings the information to them, that opens their eyes, that's wonderful. I love that. And I love encouraging Christians too, because a lot of Christians, they have faith in the Bible, but it's kind of a blind faith. They don't really know why it is that they believe what they believe. And when you can point out that actually the Christian faith is the only rational possibility, and there's all this science that confirms it, that's exciting to folks. It makes the Bible come alive. And I remember the first time I learned about how dinosaurs how the Bible makes sense of dinosaurs. And it was, I think Ken Ham and another speaker were presenting on that topic. And it was very exciting for me because I realized, oh yeah, of course that makes sense. The Bible does have something to say about dinosaurs, even though the word isn't mentioned because it hadn't been invented yet. So if I can share that with others, I was probably in college when I started really getting excited about how science confirms, in particular, Genesis. And now I've branched out and I'm trying to show how science confirms not just Genesis, but all different aspects of Scripture, the Christian worldview. It's fun for me, and it's certainly something that we need in our culture, where people have been given the impression that the Bible's anti-scientific. Very important that we understand it isn't.
Yeah, and I think because of the way we're wired, the way God amazingly wired us, but we have the confirmation biases, and when we end up getting taught things in a certain way, it's hard to reason the two together. And I remember I had a friend that I gave him one race, one blood. It was a fluke. I just said, here's something you might be interested in. And he called me about a week later, and he's just like, you don't know what that did to my faith. He's like, I just had this question because I was taught that it was evolved races and all these things, and I just couldn't put the Bible and what I see and diversity together. And yeah, that's the way this ministry has been. And the work that you do and continue to do is definitely, it's making an impact, and we're very blessed to be part of what you do. And we appreciate that very much. So then the last question I have for you is, I saw that we have a new project coming through Master Books called Fractals, and beautiful images. And I haven't gotten a lot of information on it yet. So as long as we got you, if you could talk to me a little bit about this new project and what people can expect with it.
Sure. And just to, if you don't mind, a little shameless promotion, I have a DVD on this topic called The Secret Code of Creation, and where I talk about this. But basically, fractals are geometric shapes that when you zoom in on them, you find that small sections of them resemble the overall shape, amazingly. So, and snowflake would be an example. You zoom in on a snowflake and you'll find that it still has that six-fold symmetry. You find sort of smaller versions.
You have a snowflake?
Say again?
Even with all the diversity of the snowflakes, every snowflake represents...
They have a fractal-like quality, meaning that if I zoom in on a snowflake, it kind of looks the same as the overall snowflake.
Amazing.
Up to a certain point. Clouds, the way clouds are, you zoom in on a cloud, it looks like a cloud. You zoom in on it more, it looks like a cloud. The overall shape repeats, or the way trees branch. So you have the trunk, and then it branches. And you look at a branch, and each branch is like a trunk that branches, and each of these branches is like a trunk that branches into branches, and so on. So every section of it kind of resembles the original.
Okay.
And those are physical fractals. But one of the things that was discovered in the 1980s is that if you test certain equations, if you plot certain equations to see which points belong in a particular set, then the map that you make of that turns out to be fractal. And so, and that was a surprise to everyone. Nobody really knew that was coming. But there are certain sets. A set is just a group of numbers that have a certain property in common. And there are certain sets that are defined by a recursive algorithm, which means you have a number and you put it through a little formula, like a little machine, and you get another number. And then you put it back in and you get another number, and you put it back in and you get another number. And you do this forever. And one of two things will happen. Either the number that comes out will get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and go off to infinity, or it won't. It'll stay small. Sometimes it'll go down to zero and stay zero. So it'll either get big or it won't. And if you make a map of which points, which numbers get big and which ones stay small, it'll produce a shape. And in particular, the Mandelbrot set is one of these recursive algorithms. You put the numbers through, and then when you make the map of it, you get the most beautiful shape you could imagine. It's incredible. And you find that when you zoom in on that, you'll find little baby versions that are almost identical to the overall shape. And you can zoom in on them, and they have grandbabies and so on. And it's just, and the beauty of it's awesome. So if you've had a chance to look at some of the pictures in that book, those are not man-made. Those shapes are built into math by the creator of math. And so it really turns out to illustrate something about the mind of God, that we know his mind's awesome in the sense of being able to think through all the things that make this universe work. But not only does math work, it has a beauty to it that nobody knew about before about 1980. Nobody, because before then we didn't have computers fast enough to be able to check these numbers and make these amazing plots. But
Right.
so those plots are just examples of beauty that God has built into math, and there's no secular explanation for it. There really isn't. And so that's what you're going to see with this book. So I've got the DVD out and the Blu-ray too. It's beautiful in Blu-ray. And then I thought,
The DVD again?
it's called The Secret Code of Creation. And
Okay.
likewise, the Blu-ray, The Secret Code of Creation. And the book will probably have a similar title. We might have that as the subtitle for the book, Fractals, The Secret Code of Creation, something like that. So
Okay.
it'll go along with the DVD, but it'll go into more depth, because in a 1-hour presentation, I can only give so much information on these things. But in a book, I can take my time, and we want this book to be kind of a coffee table style book. Incredibly colorful. My hope is that people will pick this book up and say, wow, what is this? And they'll read about it and they'll realize that the creator has built in beauty into math. And if they're not Christians, they'll say, I have to submit to God. They're obviously the God of the Bible did this, because there's no other explanation for it. So I'm hoping people read the book and get saved. That's my goal. And I think it'll just be fun. I think it'll be encouraging for Christians, and even kids will appreciate. They won't understand the math, but they'll appreciate the pictures, and that these pictures really have been drawn by God. They've not been drawn by human hands.
When I pastored, one of the things that really stuck out was the more we learn about God's consistent nature, the more we can trust his word. And seeing a book like that, where all of a sudden you realize his consistency is so remarkable that it can actually create a picture, is what is he doing in our lives that we don't even understand, and what through his word don't we completely understand that he's telling us, but he has infinite wisdom beyond what we can even imagine. So
yeah, and these fractals, these mathematical fractals, they are infinite. That's another thing I wanted to point out. You can zoom in on these forever, and they get prettier and prettier the more you zoom in, and more complex. Unlike man-made machines, which get simpler when you go in, God's mathematics gets more complex, and it gives you a little window into what it must be like to be able to think infinitely. I mean, we can't really wrap our minds around that as finite creatures, but I think it's going to be a great, fun book. And anybody who buys it too will get a copy of the computer program. I wrote the computer program that generates, that plots these graphs. The shapes are made by God, but the program will allow you to explore these shapes on your own, and you can make your own graphs. So that'll be fun too.
Yeah, that'll be fun. Yeah, I look forward to marketing that. That'll be a lot of fun. So I enjoy marketing all of your books. So,
thanks.
Yeah, well, some marketing. One of the things we say is, good marketing makes bad products fail faster, but good marketing makes good products sell. And I think, I've never had a problem selling your products. You're solid. So
okay. Well, thanks.
I appreciate being able to work to advance the kingdom with you, and all that you do. I know you face the critics, and you have to have some thick skin some days, but we certainly do appreciate that you're willing to do that. So
well, thanks. Appreciate it.
And I appreciate you for joining and sharing with us, because I know we see these ads coming up, or your Facebook feed is full of the Bethlehem Star. And so there's been some really good information to help us make sense of it.
All right. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Jason. And for everybody that's here, we will put links in the post for the Stargazer's Guide, for some of Jason's page of products. And then be sure to be looking out for the Fractals book that's coming. I think that's slated in the spring. It's going in the catalog for this spring. So I look forward to that. All right, guys, God bless. We'll talk to you later.